If you are lifting weights, like if you're doing resistance training, you have to wait 3 to 4 hours before you actually do the cold water plunges, because it will kill your gains, right? Because you're tearing your muscles as you're working out, and your muscles need some time to rebuild. And if you go into cold water right after you work out in a resistance exercise, it actually stops your gains. So just something to remember. If you are going to lift and you're trying to get bigger or whatever it is, and you want to do cold water exposure, do it 3 or 4 hours later. First of all, I want to thank all of you who subscribe to this channel. We're growing our subscribership every week, which is great. And we're going to have some really great guests coming up in the future. I'm actually putting together a list now of some folks that love to get on this podcast. If you have suggestions, please let me know, and we'll see what we can do so we can get the content that you want. But thank you so much for subscribing. And also thank you for those of you who have read my books and are continuing to review my books on Amazon. Latest one here is Blood Promise. It's the second in the Jack Trench thriller series, and getting some good reviews on Amazon. But I encourage you to pick up a copy, and I think you'll get a good ride out of it. So anyway, I wanted to talk to you just for a few minutes about something that I've been doing for probably 5 months or so now, and that's the whole idea of cold plunging. And I guess this is a leadership podcast, so probably thinking, well, what does that have to do with leadership? Well, just you got to be patient, and I'll eventually get there. I'm always trying to figure out ways to improve myself, whether it's mentally or physically, spiritually. It's just something that's innate in me. I just love the idea of seeing how far you can push yourself, push your body, push your mind for continuous improvement. Remember, when we talk about leadership, I always say it's a journey, right? It's always it's continuous improvement. The journey never ends. I said that in both of the leadership books I've written, and I mention it a lot during when I make speeches. And so part of that to me is also how you test yourself and push yourself, just like you do in the leadership field. So about probably close to half a year, but let's say 5 months, I started looking into this idea of cold plunging. And started reading, you start seeing celebrities doing this thing called cold plunge or cold showers. And so I started doing a lot of research, went on YouTube, and then also read about guys like Andrew Huberman. He's a brilliant scientist at the University of California, Berkeley. And he's done a lot of research on the effects of cold exposure, as he calls it, to the body. And he mentioned a guy's name named Wim Hof, and Wim Hof is considered the guru of cold plunging, of cold immersion, cold exposure therapy. And his story is very interesting. As a young man, he had a wife and kids, and unfortunately his wife passed away, and he was distraught, and he was left raising kids by himself. And he could have taken any number of routes to deal with this trauma. And one day he decided to just, he's a European, and he lived in, I can't remember what country he was in, but a lot of cold water out there. And he got into a body of cold water. And what was interesting was the shock of the cold water, first of all, made him forget about everything else except other than he's cold. And then on top of that, he started realizing that he felt better after he got out. There was something about this mind-body connection and cold water exposure that started him on this lifelong path of exploring this. And so Wim Hof, if you look him up, he's won all these different titles for doing this crazy stuff like swimming under the ice, running a marathon in, I can't remember, Antarctica or something like that, with just his shorts on. I mean, the guy is like crazy, but he's crazy in a good way. And he's also got a breathing technique that he uses that helps deal with the cold water exposure. So I started reading up more about Wim Hof and seeing a lot of his videos and a lot of testimonials from people who actually train with him and continue to train with him. He still has a lot of people that will train. He's got dedicated trainers around the world that will train people in the Wim Hof technique. Of a lot of it is the breathing to get your body under control, and then the cold water exposure. So, and the other part of it is your body has kind of two different neurotransmitter systems, for lack of a better term. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but again, I've been reading about this. You have the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems in your body. The sympathetic system is your fight or flight. This is when you get scared, you're confronted with something, and you have to either fight, right, or you flee. In an emergency situation, that's what kicks in, your adrenaline kicks in, and that's the sympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is your body's ability to relax and to stay calm. So what happens when you are exposed to cold and cold weather or cold water, especially some type of cold that affects the body, your body automatically goes into the sympathetic system because it doesn't like cold, and it will fight. Your heart rate will go up, and a lot of things happen in your body. But the whole idea of a cold water exposure is to be able to get to the point where you can go from the sympathetic, the fight or flight, and use your breath control, use your mind, your concentration, your will, to then move it over to the parasympathetic, the relaxation stage. So I started off first with deciding, okay, I'm going to try cold showers first. And, I remember like the first time I tried it, first of all, and I wasn't doing it where a lot of people recommend, okay, take your hot shower, your warm shower, and then slowly crank the temperature on your shower to cold, and then let it cold hit you for a little bit, and then that's kind of how you get acclimated. I kind of just went in all the way. I don't know if that was the smartest thing to do, but that's what I did. And the day I decided to do it, I just said, okay, there's cold water. I got in, and holy smokes, man, it was a shock to the system. It wasn't pleasant. I probably lasted not even a minute, maybe 30 seconds. But that, like everything else, you have to keep at it. And so I kept trying and going for it. And at some point I realized, the whole breathing techniques, because as soon as that cold hits you, it takes your breath away, and the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, and it wants you to get out of there. But you stay there and you start controlling your breathing, you start concentrating. And one of the things that I remember was whatever was happening that day, whether it was a problem, something that I knew I was going to have to deal with, I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just thinking about that cold water hitting my body, getting my breath under control, concentrating and thinking. And as I started to get better at that, then I was able to last a lot longer under that cold water. And initially it was, I remember too, it was, for some reason, the water hitting my chest was cold. The water hitting my back felt colder. I don't know why. And initially I wasn't like getting my head wet. But at some point I said, yeah, obviously I've got to do this. And so I started just doing a regular shower, but with the cold water. And got to 45 seconds, then got to a minute, and probably over a period of a couple of weeks, I was able to get up to 5 minutes, which is the max I want to do. Usually all the experts say 11 minutes a week of cold exposure, it will give you the maximum, will give you your benefits, right? You want to do at least 11 minutes. You know, I do more. I usually average 5 minutes a day of doing something, whether it's a shower, cold shower, or lately it's been mostly the cold plunges. But the more I started doing the cold showers, the more I realized that I was getting some really interesting benefits. Now, I've got a little cheat sheet here, but right now a cold plunge is anywhere between 50 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, that's considered cold plunge territory. You can certainly go lower, and the weather now in Las Vegas is cold, and so our pool and the spa that we have are perfect for cold plunging. They're averaging about 41 to 44, 45 degrees as the crow flies every day, and that's what we're getting into, you know, getting in that kind of water. But that's the sweet spot. But as I started, and I was doing this, and I still do this before working out. Now, I need to say something. There are obviously athletes that have been doing cold plunges, professional athletes, for years. They've been cold water therapy. They're using it because their muscles are all banged up. Let's say football players, right? They're getting hit all the time. It's like getting hit by a car every time you work out and play a game. So they do the cold water to get it's recovery. If it's great for recovery, but if you are lifting weights, like if you're doing resistance training, you have to wait 3 to 4 hours before you actually do the cold water plunges, because it will kill your gains, right? Because you're tearing your muscles as you're working out, and your muscles need some time to rebuild. And if you go into cold water right after you work out in a resistance exercise, it actually stops your gains. So just something to remember. If you are going to lift and you're trying to get bigger or whatever it is, and you want to do cold water exposure, do it 3 or 4 hours later. But I do it before working out because to me, a lot of the benefits. Number one, it builds resilience. If there's nothing else, cold water exposure builds resilience. It teaches you to endure something that most human beings don't want to do. But those of us that do, doesn't make us any better. It just means that we're able to build, I think, a lot more resilience. That's why when you look at military training, you look at, everybody's seen pictures in the movies or documentaries about Navy SEALs, being forced to go into the water and training, holding on to each other while at nighttime, usually with all this cold water from Coronado Bay hitting them, right? And most of your military forces, special forces especially, there'll be some cold water, some kind of cold exposure, because it teaches you resilience to endure. So that's number one. Because I figure if I can do that, then anything else that happens during that day, I can always harken back to, well, whatever I'm dealing with may be a bad situation, but it ain't standing in a shower under cold water or being immersed up to your neck in 41-degree water. It's not that. And it puts you in an interesting frame of mind to deal with situations. It also releases a lot of your dopamine levels. That's a feel good, right? That's the feel good stuff in your body. And there's a marked increase in dopamine when you get in cold water. And for me, that's great because that helps me, like I said, I do it before I work out. So when I go to work out, I'm alert. My mind is resilient. And so no matter what happens during the workout, as hard as, for instance, what we do, Janice and I do F45, as tough as that is, there are times when going through a particular set of doing something that's hard, and I can close my eyes and think about, hey, I'm in the cold water, right? I can deal with this because I've done this before. And it just gives you that resilience. And that's a huge benefit. There's also evidence that it helps your immune system. You know, by you being, ironically being in cold water, it helps build up your immune system that you can fight off germs and other things, you know, better because you are exposing yourself to this. There's also some cardiovascular benefits because as you immerse yourself or are exposed to cold, your body automatically wants to send all your blood from like your hands and your feet to your vital organs through this system of veins and capillaries that we have throughout our body. And then because it wants to protect the lungs and the heart and the kidneys and all the vital organs of the body, you know. And that's why when you get in cold water, you're going to find obviously that your hands and feet feel kind of numb. But that whole, you know, going here and then coming back into your extremities really helps keep your veins and the system of this body that you have, this roadwork of blood vessels that you have in your body. It keeps it pliable, so it really helps your cardiovascular system. Let's see what else. And it's supposed to rev up your metabolism as well, because that cold water exposure actually creates more what they call brown fat in your body, which is the good kind of fat, versus the white fat, which isn't. So there's evidence that it increases your metabolism. And what's interesting is that this cold water exposure is not new. In fact, what was it? I was just reading about this. Where was it? Hippocrates, you know, the doctor from back in the old days. He was practicing cold water exposure, and a lot of another thing I've been really involved with in the last probably 6 months as well is this whole idea of stoicism, because I think it's a really good complement to what I believe in Christ and Christianity. It's really a complement to that. But the Stoics, and that's for another podcast, they used to challenge themselves, a lot of them, with, at the beginning of the year, a cold plunge, right? To get the year started off right by doing something that was difficult, that they could overcome. So there are a lot of benefits to this. Now, I graduated from showers to, okay, I'm going to do a cold plunge. And it was kind of interesting. It was like the same thing. It was like I was training for this cold plunge with showers. But the showers will never, even though it's cold as this water is there, for some reason it doesn't feel as cold as when you actually plunge. And immersing your body is the number one. You know, if you can't do that, you don't, for whatever reason, you don't have a cold plunge, or you don't, you know, you live in a warm climate and your pool or whatever never gets cold. Cold showers are great. But if The cold plunging, where you totally immerse your body for a certain period of time, that's the best, because that's when you really have to concentrate and use your willpower and your mind and your breathing to get yourself. So it was almost like going back to step one, because once I got into the water, uh, again, maybe 30 seconds, maybe 40, first time out, and then that was it. You know, I was just like, it was hard. One of the things I realized too, and you may want to look at this, is my hands and my feet were getting extremely cold to the point where they were painful. And I don't think cold water exposure shouldn't be painful. It needs to be uncomfortable, but it doesn't have to be painful. So we invested in these sort of dive gloves and booties. And that was a game changer, because then you're not worried about your hands and your feet. You can just worry about immersing, the rest of your body. And again, it was a process. And so keep at it, you practice the breathing techniques. And then over a period of time, I was able to move up to a minute and 2 minutes. And finally, I can do up to, I normally go 5 minutes. That's the norm. I do 5 minutes, get out. 10 minutes, if I really need to do 10 minutes. I can do more, but I made a big mistake, which is, those of you that are like me, you're kind of type A's, and you always want to push it. We were visiting some friends last year in Boston area, Sudbury, and it's a suburb of Boston. There was a reunion of a bunch of us that had taken a trip to Italy together. And we were staying at some friend's house, and they have a nice pool. Now, this, mind you, we're talking about, late fall, winter time, so it's cold out there. We lucked out though. On one day, it was a Saturday. It was a beautiful, warm day. It was kind of freakish that day. And we got to tour around very historical sites. But what was interesting was, like I said, our friends had a pool, and they decided after we came back from sightseeing, hey, we just go in the pool just for a second, even though it was cold. It wasn't heated. So everybody went in, normally just for like a few minutes, and then just to get wet and get out. We kind of hung around. I stayed in the pool, talking, probably for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, then got out, and we were going to have some appetizers, afterwards. And so, go change and dress, went into our friend's kitchen, and I remember I was like shivering uncontrollably. I was like, I could feel it, right? And then everybody decided, hey, we're gonna have dinner soon, so everybody go chill. So Janice and I went back to our room, and I was literally shaking. It was like borderline hypothermia. So it was a lesson, right? I overdid it, and it took me a while to get back to normal. Probably created a heck of a lot of brown fat cells that day because of all the excessive shivering. Because the shivering itself is a good thing, because it says your body is trying to generate heat, which also helps that metabolism thing. But at some point, I got to 5 minutes, and where I am now, and it's great. I'm totally hooked on this. Janice has even been doing it to a large extent, and was able to do up to her waist, up to over 5 minutes at one point. Again, it's the whole building resilience, building that mindset. And if you can also combine it with something Dr. Huberman also talks about, is in the morning, there's something about morning sunlight, that exposure to that in your eyes, that helps your circadian rhythm, which is just your body's rhythm of telling you when it's time to wake up and when it's time to go to sleep. 5 minutes of morning sun will help your body circadian rhythm stay in rhythm. So it will let you know when it's late, at nighttime, hey, it's probably time to get ready to go to bed, right? And so being able to plunge, and again, this is not for everybody. It depends on where you live. We live in Las Vegas. We get a lot of sunshine, which is the reason why we moved here. So I can be in the pool or spa, getting my cold water exposure, and having my eyes getting that morning sun. So I'm getting double benefits. So by the time I get to working out or wherever I go, I'm ready for the day. My body-wise, I'm ready for the day. Now, cold water exposure to me is a good thing. It's not for everybody, and I'm not trying to say you should do it. What I would say is think about it, explore it, and find out, study about it. I studied this for a long time before I actually started wanting to do it, simply because it was important to me to, again, try to see what else I could do for my health and to improve myself and to push it. And it wasn't because, celebrities like Wahlberg or Joe Rogan and all these other folks were doing it, and because it can be this fad thing. But the more I read about it, the more I read that there are definite scientific benefits, scientifically backed benefits to exposing yourself to cold water. And as I mentioned, it does build that resilience, that the fact that you can overcome something. And if nothing else goes on right during the day, this is something that you've done and you've conquered. And I think that's an important part, right? And it's to me, it's now part of my lifestyle. It always will be. So whether it's a cold plunge or a cold shower, or even exposing yourself to cold weather, that has some benefits too. But obviously, the water thing is the most important because your body doesn't like it, and because you can overcome it mentally and physically. That's where you get your benefits from. So this will be part of my lifestyle forever, as long as I can do it, right, without hurting yourself. The other thing Huberman talks about, which is interesting, and I can't remember the scientific term, but I think he was talking to Jocko Willink. I think Jocko was on Huberman's podcast, I believe. But anyway, they were talking about this whole cold water thing because, Jocko does it as well. But what's interesting is, and I remember they were joking because Jocko's a pretty well-built guy, and he was doing it after working out. And Huberman was telling him about, you got to wait a few hours because it'll kill your gains. And so then Jocko was joking, well, I guess I've been doing it wrong. But then Huberman looked at him and said, obviously you're not doing it wrong because, look at the way you look. And they were kind of laughing. But one of the things that Huberman talked about too is there's something in your brain that, in terms of your brain getting stronger, when you expose yourself to something that your body, your brain, they don't like, if it's uncomfortable, right? So let's say you go in a cold plunge and you like it. Like it's not a big deal. I could do this, I could just sit here and it's not uncomfortable. Well, your brain's not getting the benefit of resilience and of making your brain stronger, right? I can't remember the term, but if you are uncomfortable, on the other hand, it's like working out a muscle. If you're doing bicep curls and you're feeling it because you're feeling that next rep is just killing you, well, that's where you're making your gains. Well, it's kind of the same thing here. And so when you're in cold water exposure, you're not liking it. And as long as you're not liking it, but you are enduring it and getting through it, your mind actually gets stronger. Uh, Oops, hold on.
This is a reminder. Pray.
Hold on, there's one more.
This is a reminder. Pray.
Now this podcast, we keep it real. So we're doing it from the house. So whether it's Kiku barking every so often so this is just a reminder for me to make sure that I get some prayer time in during the day. So I don't get so busy with like doing stuff like this, I forget to do my prayer. So now you know that part of my life too. But anyway, so I just wanted to talk about my cold water exposure, immersion journey. I'm going to have links in this podcast to one of the videos from Wim Hof, as well as one of the videos from Andrew Huberman, talk about this cold water exposure and immersion. But I would challenge you to take a look at it. Remember, the body does not like it. Human beings, unless you're Wim Hof, crazy guy like him, crazy in a good way, do not like cold. We don't like cold weather. We don't like cold exposure for the most of us. There are some people in this world that actually like cold, but the vast majority of us would rather be out in 80-degree weather than, minus 20-degree weather. That's just the way we're built. So to expose yourself intentionally to the cold is something that goes against the grain of your body, but also will provide you physical and mental and spiritual benefits if you keep at it, and if you tack it in the right way, which is, how's that going to improve me, improve my day, improve my ability to deal with bad things that are going to happen, because they do happen. We get stressors every day. This is one way out of a lot of different ways where we can handle whatever's coming our way, because we know we can do this tough thing. So that's all I have for now. I just wanted to delve into that because to me there is a tie-in with leadership, because leadership is tough, leadership is hard, and it's not for the faint of heart. Neither is cold water immersion. And I think they complement each other very well. I think if you're a leader and you're in a stressful, pressure-filled environment, there are many ways, whether it's working out or prayer or meditation or practicing stoicism or whatever you find, but this is another tool for your leadership toolkit. This is one other way that I believe you can make yourself a more resilient person and therefore a more resilient leader. So that's all I have for this edition of the Ronin Leadership Podcast. Thank you for subscribing to this channel. Literally, I'll be working this afternoon on possible podcast guests, so we can get some more people out here talking about leadership and their journey, their business journey, their struggles, and how they've overcome their trials in life to become successful. Continue to hit the subscribe button and the like button. And like I said, we'll provide the links on this cold water immersion here in the podcast. Continue to please give us comments and tell your friends and family about the podcast. Thank you so much for your support. Till the next time, we'll be back with another edition of the Ronin Leadership Podcast.